Welcome to the third drawing challenge. This one's a bit more straightforward. How to use a 2B pencil to create line and tone in a drawing. Now I'm going to whiz through some of the basic things. What I'm doing here is just positioning the head, the portrait that I'm going to do on the paper. I'm using basic geometric lines indicating angles and just getting the position of some of the basic elements of the face. The nose, the eyebrows, cheeks, mouth, etc. As I said, we're going to whiz through this. You'll see wee jumps from time to time in the film. But from very early stages you can see that I'm starting to indicate at least where areas of tone will be under the eyebrows, the eye sockets, the top lip, under the bottom lip, those kind of areas. And we're going to be using the hair on this portrait to kind of frame the picture. We'll also just deal with the hair slightly differently to create a difference in texture between the hair and the harder lines that are used on the face. So as I go on, I'm just correcting lines, correcting angles, looking at more specifically at the positioning of things, putting bits of shade in. Now, one of the things that people often do, which is a kind of an error, is to make solid areas of tone. I don't do that. What I tend to do is to use either cross-hatching, which are a series of lines crisscrossed over one another, and by using the softness of the 2B pencil lead, and by leaning a little heavier or a little lighter, create a difference in the darkness of the line or the tone. As you can see here when I'm doing the eyes, I'm putting in more specific lines here, so I can afford to make them a bit darker. You don't want your lines to be dark from the very beginning because it just gives you more to rub out and your drawing will become a bit muddy, a bit messy. So we build on very faint lines, and the 2B pencil will allow you to do that. It'll start from very, very faint to a reasonable darkness, which should allow you the flexibility to create 3 dimensions in your drawing, or at least the illusion of 3 dimensions. But we won't overdo the shading. We'll try to keep the shading to a minimum, and that would always be my advice. Don't do as little as you can get away with. Don't go too heavy too soon. And put the minimum amount of shading that allows you to describe what you're drawing without it becoming a black, smudgy mess. As I said, we're going to use the hair to sort of frame the picture, frame the face. So that's me starting to put a few lines in, just to create that frame around the face. There's no need for the hair to be as detailed as the work you do on the face. It's a very different texture here. And so a softer approach is much more preferable. As you can see, I'm just indicating areas of shade here down the side of the nose and on the forehead. So it's a mixture of line and shade that we're using here. A valuable piece of equipment when you're doing a pencil drawing is the putty rubber. It will allow you to soften lines and also clean the paper. You'll see later on in this drawing, I've used the putty rubber to clean the paper in order to create highlights on the face. But we're still doing some correction here, we're still getting things a bit more specific. And doing our best to make sure this is accurate to what I'm seeing. And you can see many of the lines are still of an angular nature, because I'm still all the while measuring, comparing to what's there already, comparing it to the source material. Look at where areas of shade help to describe the object. And that's a decent sort of juncture where we've got most of the drawing done. We've cleaned it up using the putty rubber and taken away a lot of the initial lines that we used at the very beginning of the drawing. So now just doing a wee bit of work in the hair, creating some of the folds and the waves, but very much softer than the work that's been done on the face itself. Right, just indicating some areas of shadow now where the hair overlaps the face, just helping to frame that face. And you can see that there's no solid shading going on here. The pencil's creating a sort of hatched effect in a lot of the shading areas, or simply lines going in the same direction. But what we're trying to achieve here is at least the semblance of 3 dimensions of a face existing in the round. And later we'll use some shading just to make softer changes in direction on the face. But at the moment, we're just shading in the hair a little, just to assist with that 3-dimensional feel. See, no heavy shading, just using the softness of the pencil to help create the variation in the tone, especially in the hair. And this technique can be applied, it doesn't have to be a portrait, it can be applied to objects you have about your home, bowl of fruit, landscape, anything. It's a good, reasonable means of applying line and tone to a drawing without it becoming a mess or dark and heavy. Putty rubber coming out, just softening down some lines, cleaning up wee bits. creating wee highlights within the eye. Now, darkening those eyebrows allows them to come forward a little, which helps the eyes to recede a bit and helps to create that sense of 3 dimensions, and infers the eye socket as well. Again, just working around the skull, softening the edges where the head turns away from us, or where the skin gently folds over. Just wee lines of shade in there. All the while correcting, looking closer. Another point I should mention is that I'm doing this upright on an easel. It's by far and away the easiest way to keep your paper clean. If you're doing it on a desk, your hand will come into contact much more with the paper and will spread the graphite from the pencil around the drawing a lot more. So it's one way of keeping clean. And we're just working on some of the internal shading in the eye here. Again, we don't want to go too heavy. Just softening round the edges as the face turns away from us. Describing the shadows created by the hair. Just creating the softness of the edges of the mouth and the cheeks. It doesn't take a lot, as you can see. Drawing's starting to come together now. But I'll press on a wee bit more with some shading. I normally wouldn't do a great deal of shading in a drawing, but I'll do a bit more on this one, just to demonstrate how you'd go about that. We're very close now to the completed drawing. There we go. So, I hope you enjoy this drawing challenge. As I said, it doesn't have to be a portrait, it can be anything around the house. 2B pencil, I would recommend. And enjoy the challenge. Look forward to seeing it.